Hi there. So in this video, we're going to be doing extra practice module 42. And I'll just say that the Forex is what this one's all about. And so if you haven't watched the two lectures on foreign exchange, then you really need to do that before coming into this. The book phrases some questions in a really kind of awkward way. And it does require that you understand the material about real exchange rates that's in the second lecture. So we'll go ahead and get started. Check your understanding. Number one, gives this scenario where suppose Mexico discovers huge reserves of oil and starts exporting oil to the United States. Describe how this would affect the following. So if Mexico is selling the oil to the United States, that means the United States is buying the oil, right? So we know, if US is buying Mexican oil, right, we could just rewrite that. We could say, therefore, there's an increase in demand for Mexican peso. I probably should have just written, peso or something. And therefore, there's also an increase in the supply of US dollars. So these two things happen simultaneously in that market for foreign exchange because the Americans have to bring more dollars to the peso market in order to buy more pesos in order to buy the Mexican oil. So it's saying what happens to the nominal peso dollar exchange rate. So this is the way they phrase this doesn't actually really make clear whether they want the US dollar to peso or the peso to dollar. So we could just say the peso appreciates and the US dollar depreciates. Right? And that covers all of our bases because I'm not 100% sure what they want on that one. And we know that because if the demand for something's going up, then the price of it is going to be rising. And if the supply of something's going up, then we know that the price is going to be falling. Part B says, what about Mexican exports of other goods and services? Well, if the peso is getting more expensive, then it's more expensive for other people, like Americans in this case, to purchase other Mexican goods. So it would decrease the other things, and for C, it would increase their imports because if the Mexican peso is very valuable, then they can go to the United States and they can buy lots and lots more dollars. And so then they can buy lots more stuff. And so their imports of things other than oil would increase. Okay. Number two says, suppose a basket of goods and services that costs $100 in the United States costs 800 pesos in Mexico, and the current nominal exchange rate is 10 pesos per dollar. Over the next 5 years, the cost of that market basket rises to $120 in the United States and to 1,200 pesos in Mexico, although the nominal rate remains at 10 per dollar. Calculate the following. A, the real exchange rate now and 5 years from now of today's price index in both countries is 100. So just as a kind of a refresher, right, if we have this like pesos per US dollar, that's the exchange rate, and we're given that as like 10 over 1. And then we multiply that to get the real exchange rate. We multiply that by the price level in the US over the price level in Mexico. So we kind of flip these, right? So we know that that's the Mexican currency, that's the US currency. So these are the flip, and that will give us the real exchange rate of pesos to US dollar. Peso to USD. So this is the formula that we're going to use as we solve this. We are given 10 over 1, and then we're given some information about what does this price levels look like. Well, in part A, if it's the real exchange rate now, right, A, now would be times the price level in the United States, which is 100. They tell us that. And then they say that, that in both countries, it's 100. So over 100, so the real rate now is 10 per 1. 10 pesos per 1 US dollar. Now, in B, it's saying 5 years from now, and it gives us the prices 5 years from now. And basically, you kind of have to see like that it goes from $100 to $120. So we're going to say, so that's for part A. This is part B. The original, that's the nominal rate that we're using. And we know, and it says the nominal rate remains at 10 pesos per dollar. So they don't change that for us. Times, and so our new price level in the United States, it actually will be 120 because you're going from 100 to 120. Realistically, what we're really doing here is 120 minus 100 over 100, and then, times 100. And so that actually gives us like the price level in the United States. For the other one, it's going to be 1,200 minus the 800 over the 800 times 100. And that gives us kind of what the price levels are going to be in those two countries. So If you solve all of that, that ends up being 120. And this one is a 50% increase, so it ends up being 150. So we've got 10 times 12 over 150. And in that case, then it kind of adjusts it to, I don't know, what is this? This is 4/5 times 10. So that's, 40 over 5, which is 8. So 5 years, it will be 8 pesos per 1 US dollar. And so this is a little bit of a convoluted process. You're not going to be asked to do that on an AP test, I can't imagine. But all I've done here, if you're like wondering, oh my God, he set up all of these crazy numbers, is I've just figured out like what's the new price level in the United States compared to what it used to be. Well, it used to be 100, and now prices are at 120, so the new value is 120. For the peso, it went from 800 to 1200, and so if it originally the index value was 100, now it's 150 because it's a 50% increase from where it used to be, going from 800 to 1200. So 120 over 150 is 4/5. And again, you can just kind of simplify by figuring those, and you divide both by 3, and you go 12 over 15 is 4/5 times the 10 is 40 over 5, which is 8. So that way we know it's 8 pesos. Sorry, that's not part B. That's the second part of question A. Then it says part B, what's the purchasing power parity today and 5 years from now? So today, it's really just compare like, well, the market basket in the United States costs $100 and it's 800 pesos. So today it's 8 pesos per 1 US dollar. And then in 5 years, you're just really comparing like the market basket in that sense. So it's 1200 to 120. So then that's 10 pesos to 1 US dollar. And again, that assumes that the nominal rate stayed the same. So, all right, now all of that, let's do some multiple choice. Like I said, this is kind of a technical one. So MC number 1, when the dollar buys more yen, the dollar has appreciated and it also has become more valuable. So 1 and 2 only, D. Number 2, the nominal exchange rate at which a given basket of goods and services costs the same in each country. That's just purchasing power parity. It just means that it's across the two. That's not going to show up on your quiz. Number 3, what happens to the real exchange rate between the euro and the dollar if the aggregate price levels in Europe and the United States both go down? So this one, like by default, you might say, well, it's unaffected because the real rate, if they both drop, then the real rate stays the same. But we don't know the magnitude of the two changes. They're not being particularly clear on that aspect. So the correct answer here is D, actually. Number 4 is, which of the following would cause the real exchange rate between pesos and dollars expressed in terms of pesos per dollar to decrease? So I'm going to change the wording on this one to say basically, why would the US dollar depreciate? Because that's all they're really saying here. And by the way, I'm also going to take number 3 out. I should tell you that. But I will change the wording on number 4 because that is a bunch of gobbledygook that basically just says, why would the US dollar depreciate compared to the peso? Pesos per dollar is the price of the dollar. And so why would the dollar go down in value? So let's go through these. A, an increase in capital flows from Mexico to the United States. Well, that would cause more people to want dollars because they want to buy US stocks, bonds, and real estate. So A is not correct. B, an increase in the real interest rate in Mexico relative to the United States. That would cause the dollar to depreciate because the dollars would be moving to Mexico, causing there to be more of a supply in the foreign exchange market in order to buy more pesos, in order to buy the Mexican assets that are paying the higher interest rates. And so there's an increase in the supply of dollars, which causes the dollar to depreciate. So B is the correct answer. We'll go through the other 3. A doubling of prices in both Mexico and the United States, that wouldn't change the real exchange rate. Now we actually do know that the relative sizes are doubling as opposed to in question 3. So that wouldn't change it. D says a decrease in oil exports from Mexico to the United States. So that would cause basically depreciation of the peso because now the US isn't going to need as many pesos because that's what they were paying for the oil with. So if the peso is depreciating, then the dollar would be appreciating in D. E, an increase in the balance of payments in the current account in the United States. So that actually means that like the US current account is getting bigger, which means that the US is actually selling more goods and services to the world. And that would cause the US dollar to appreciate, because in order for people to buy the American stuff, they need American dollars. So they're kind of more pesos chasing fewer and fewer US dollars, causing the dollar to appreciate rather than depreciate. So question number 5, which of the following will decrease the supply of dollars in the Forex market? US residents increase their travel abroad. That would actually cause there to be an increase of dollars because they would be putting their dollars into the Forex market and buying other currencies. B, US consumers demand fewer imports. So if they're not buying as much stuff from overseas, then they're not supplying as many dollars to the foreign exchange market because they don't need to buy as much stuff. So B is actually our correct answer here. C, foreigners increase their demand for US goods. That would increase the demand for dollars, but it wouldn't affect the supply of dollars, right? It just increases the demand for them. Foreigners increase their travel to the United States, likewise would increase the demand for dollars, but not the change the supply. Foreign investors see increased investment opportunities in the United States. Again, increase the demand for dollars, but not change the supply. All right, let's take a look at free response number 2. Hopefully it's not very large. Use a correctly labeled graph of the foreign exchange market between the US and Europe to illustrate what would happen to the value of the dollar if there were an increase in the demand for imports, US demand for imports from Europe. So we need 2 graphs side by side here, and we'll do quantity of euro, quantity of US dollar. So this is the US dollar market and the euro market. Remember, bottom. So the bottom here, US dollars, the bottom here is euros, and then the top here is euro and then US dollar. And demand, supply, demand, supply. And it's saying, what are we saying? If there were an increase in the demand for imports from Europe. So there's an increase in demand for euros, because if they're buying more European stuff, then they got to buy more euros. But in order to get those euros, what do they have to supply more of? They have to supply more dollars. S1. So the Americans have to bring more dollars into the Forex market. So the US dollar depreciates and the euro appreciates. All right, hopefully that helped you. See you next time.